Hi, and welcome to Spoonful of Strength. I'm Rachel, and I live with multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, and a few other diagnoses that keep life interesting.
And I'm Tina. I am a fibromyalgia warrior with chronic back issues and a proud stage 4 cancer survivor. We're sisters, and together we're here to support, inspire, and connect. So if you're new here, the spoon theory explains how we navigate life with limited energy or spoons.
And we're thrilled to share that we've been ranked number 30 on FeedSpot's Top 100 Chronic Illness podcast list. So grab a spoon and let's dig into stories, tips, and a whole lot of strength. Welcome to another episode of Spoonful of Strength. We are really excited to have you here today as we're talking about writing and journaling and how that impacts chronic illness. And we'll be giving you some tips and tricks on things that if you enjoy writing or if you haven't ever done any journaling, we'll be talking a little bit about that today. Later in this episode, we are going to welcome in Rebecca, and Rebecca is going to be joining us to talk about hypermobile spectrum and POTS. And she is also a writer and has a website that we'll be talking about with some blog posts and things like that. So it's going to be an interesting episode. I'm excited to be here. How are you doing, Tina?
Doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing all right too.
Are you ready for your procedure tomorrow?
I don't know because so I'm having a muscle biopsy tomorrow. I had a variant in my neuromuscular gene panel, and the variant is very unknown. A lot of times you can get a variant and it will tell you exactly what it is. And this pointed to something called centronuclear myopathy, and they don't know a lot about it. So the only way to figure out if it is that or if it's something else is to do a muscle biopsy. So they're going to be taking a good chunk of muscle from my thigh. And over the weekend, Ed and I were talking, and I was like, I just don't know, like, if this is going to be worth it. And I said, all of my surgeries have been to fix something. My shoulder, fixed my shoulder, gallbladder, get that out. And this is something that is like, I'm debating on, is it worth it? Because like I feel in my gut it's going to come back fine. But I think the reason that I'm going to go through with it is because all three of my kids have weakened muscles around their lungs. So I'm like, if I can be the guinea pig and I can get this figured out, then we can do genetic testing on them and potentially unlock maybe a myositis or a myopathy for them. So that's kind of what I'm going in there for. And so, yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the pain of it all. I mean, I think there'll be like 3 layers of skin that they have to go through, and then they have to stitch up each layer. And so it's going to be a lot. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But
it is a tough decision when, it's especially when it's something that what they're suspecting, you said, if it ends up being that, there's no treatment or no cure for it. So,
yeah,
you're purely doing it just for the knowledge part of it at this point in time that might potentially help the boys know what's going on with them. Basically.
Yeah. And they said there could be it could pop up something else. And so they said, it could also reveal something that didn't show up on the genetic testing. So we'll see. I think it's worth it just to I guess just for the knowledge, like you said, of just figuring out, especially for them, because I don't think they'll do genetic testing on the kids unless I have the biopsy that shows something. So,
yeah.
But
and it's also important information because I know, one thing that we've, mentioned from time to time is the fact that the medical research world is constantly changing. So just because even if it comes back with what they say it may be and there's no treatment now, that doesn't mean even in like 2-3 years from now something comes
Mhm.
about.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I think it's going to be difficult anyway because if it does come back, the centronuclear myopathy, if that's the only thing I had, then I would be a good person to research and find out more information about this disease. But with everything else I've got going on, I
Right.
don't, it would be so confusing. And so I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna get it done. It's 20-minute procedure and get it over with, and then we'll see in a week or so what comes about from it.
What
So,
comes back.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. So today we are talking about writing and journaling. I don't do it on a consistent basis, but I do actually find journaling very therapeutic.
hmm
And do you journal?
I have done a gratitude journal. That
Mhm.
was through my therapy a couple of years ago. I did a gratitude journal for quite a bit. And I have, about a year or so ago, I started again through therapy, started writing like an autobiography to
Okay.
kind of get out all of my thoughts about my childhood and growing up, and I have not yet come to the part of all the diagnoses and everything, but just for it to be kind of therapeutic to relive, and his rules were very simple of just write like nobody's ever going to read it, and that way
Uh-huh.
you can be so honest about things. But if we look at writing or journaling kind of as a whole, what do you think are some advantages to writing?
I think it's a great way to get those feelings that you may be struggling with or your thoughts that you're struggling with um out out of you
Mm-hmm.
and onto paper. I definitely feel like there's the process of doing that is can also be the process of releasing what needs to be released
Mm-hmm.
from you.
Right. Journaling especially kind of gives you a safe place to express emotions
Mhm.
without judgment, without anybody else seeing it. And I know that there have been studies that show that it can actually reduce stress
Mhm.
and improve mental health. Like I said, I did a gratitude journal. This was again a time in my life where everything seemed very negative. I was feeling very negative. I was, of course, that was coming out in my emotions. And so my therapist said, every morning or every evening, but keep it consistent, just write down 5 things that you're grateful for. And I think he asked me to specifically do it in the morning so that you could start out the day
Mhm.
and just 5 things that you're grateful for. Because at the time, I think I was going through a lot of medical stuff and I was just like, why is this all happening? And getting frustrated with the doctors and all of that, and not focusing on what is going good in my life. And so just taking that moment to say, you know what, I'm grateful today that Ed and I are going to go out to lunch and have a date. I'm grateful that my son is doing well in school or whatever that might be. And that was so easy to do, and it really did kind of shift my perspective a little bit. Have you
Mhm.
ever done any sort of gratitude journal?
I do, and actually, I've done that, and I've also started. It's been a couple of years, but there's been a couple of times where I start that on Facebook every morning, making a
Mm,
post going, okay, don't forget your, your three things that you're most grateful for. And, some people would share on my thread, some people would put them up there on on their Facebook page, or some people would, keep it to themselves, whatever everybody's comfortable with. But I feel like that also it really does help, because especially when you live with a chronic illness, it's so easy to get wrapped up in that, in all the negative aspect of it,
Hmm.
that sometimes you lose the positive that actually is still going on in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to get bombarded by the pain and the doctor visits and the testing and all of that. And it it really helped me. I'm glad that it helped you as well. I've always wanted to do journaling, like a daily journal. I see these people and that have like just journals and journals and journals just going through. And I think, boy, what a
Mhm.
gift for family and or to be
Yeah,
able to go back and look at things. And so I've been contemplating starting to journal every night, and especially with all the medical stuff that's going on and everything. Um, so I think I'm gonna try and start something like that.
I keep a nature journal, and I kind of got away from it a bit, because when I've been going out for a hike, I've been out with others. But when it's just me and the dogs, I
Hmm.
usually will find a nice spot to sit and rest and have my mindful moments that I love so much. And I will journal about our adventure that day, and I'll take pictures. And then, um, I don't even know where it is. It's still in my house somewhere, but I had one of those HP sprockets that you can print.
Hmm.
It pairs with your phone, and it's actual like sticker photo paper, so you can
Mm.
send your
Hmm.
photos to that and print them out. So I would do that, and then peel and stick them right in the journal, and that way I can go back and look, and not just like the descriptive part of it, but looking at the photos. And that also helps me on the days where um I'm not feeling well, or
Hmm.
if with the back injuries and I couldn't go out and hike and hit the trails like I want to, then I can grab my journal and still kind of almost fall back into that space that I enjoyed so much.
Hmm.
And that can be very healing.
What exactly would you journal about in the nature journal?
Um, so it depends on where I'm at with, in my headspace. Sometimes it's just something simple of saying, this is my observations of our hike, and but other times, which is also probably the most often times, is I will actually sit there and I will journal how I felt, going there before I made my escape into nature, and how it is helping me, how my feelings have changed, how my mood, how the anxiety is decreased, that type of that type of thing. Because again, if I go back and look at it, then that also, if I can't get out there, that helps me feel like I'm
Hmm.
reconnected, even if I'm laying around on the couch.
Yeah, that's great. Um, that could be very helpful for somebody who loves nature to be able to do
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
definitely a very big healing aspect that nature can provide to
Hmm.
you.
I also know that medical journaling can be very helpful for people with chronic illness. And again, something I wish I've kind of tiptoed with it a little bit, but especially if you're undiagnosed or you're having new symptoms, especially like stomach issues, things like that, of journaling daily how you felt, the symptoms you had, the things that you ate, and how those made you feel, your medication. I do use an app. We mentioned this way back in one of our early episodes. I do use an app called Cara. It's Cara. And it tracks everything from water to your food to your bowel movements to periods to how you felt, any symptoms that you're having and things like that. And that can be really helpful if you're experiencing new symptoms or if you're in the midst of a diagnosis, that you can kind of take that to your doctor and say, this is what I have done. And I have done something like that with my gastroenterologist, taken like a daily journal to him and being like, this is what's going on. And he was able to kind of pinpoint a couple things, and it was really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really important too. Yeah, there's so many ways for journaling, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
and different reasons to do so. And there's nothing, some people have, like you mentioned, multiple journals. This might be my nature journal. This is my medical
Mm-hmm.
journal, or my food journal. This is, my mental health journal. Because it can also, again, help with, okay, if I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling overwhelmed, if you've been journaling, you can look back
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, where is this coming from? And maybe you can pinpoint, okay, you know what, I had a really stressful week at work, and this is why it's impacting
Mm-hmm.
my that explains why I'm struggling.
Yeah.
But there's also video journaling. It doesn't have to be pen. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love my journals. Like, and the one thing that we've talked in the past when we were talking about our cognitive issues and the importance of list making. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I start getting overwhelmed, or I feel like there's too much inside my head to the point that I can't focus on those tasks because I'm so overwhelmed. Um, Dumping them out into a journal, onto a piece of paper helps. So I actually start getting itchy, and I start looking for, I have to have a notebook near me pretty much at all times, because if I can't dump it out of my head, then I start losing my ability to function and focus.
Yeah. And I have some problems with weakness in my hands. And so sometimes even writing can be tiresome. And I've even gone on to just open up a Google Doc and just type it out, because that's a lot easier for me to do than writing sometimes. But even that is something that the idea is that you're getting those thoughts out. So however it's done, whether it's done, typing it or having a physical journal or like you said, video, the idea is just to get that out. We talked in the last episode about self-esteem, and how do you think that writing can help when you're like maybe grieving your old self or going through changes physically or mentally, and going through maybe a new diagnosis? How do you think that writing can help you maneuver those feelings?
I feel like, that there's two aspects of that. One of them is, going back to that gratitude journal,
Mm-hmm.
just, okay, this is my positive thoughts only journal, so
Yeah.
to speak, because we are our own worst enemy when it comes to our self-esteem and the negative self-talk that's so easy to get into.
Mm-hmm.
So, having that positive affirmation journal that you look at every day, you pop it out and say, okay, so it's, whatever your goal, whatever feels right with you is whether it be, okay, every morning I'm going to write 3 things that I love about myself.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? And if you feel like, okay, 3 things, that's going to be really hard, do it in baby
Mm-hmm.
steps. Okay, every morning this week, I'm going to write 1 thing down that I love about myself. And then the following week, I'm going to write 2 things down. And then suddenly you'll find that it's so much easier. The more consistent that you give yourself that positive affirmation on a regular basis, then suddenly you're going to realize that perhaps your mindset has changed to a little bit more positive aspect. You're feeling a little bit better about who you are as a person and realizing
Mhm.
that, yes, I'm dealing with this chronic illness, but that doesn't change the amazing person that I am.
I wonder if you look at posting things I love about myself and looking at that first week, how that would change, looking at maybe a month out or, 3 months out, how much deeper it can go. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
maybe the
Yeah.
first couple posts or, oh, I like my hair today or whatever. And as you
Yeah.
kind of work through that and learn to love yourself a little bit more, maybe being able to see changes in that, whether it be like, I love the way that I take care of people and I am, you know, beautiful or whatever that might be, that there might be like a change
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there'll definitely be like a natural, for most, there'll be a natural progression in that where, like you said, the first time you'll be like, oh, I like my eyes, or, the physical attributes I feel like when it comes to self-esteem and self-love, there's for many people, the physical attributes are the first things that they think of. And there's just so much more than what you look like on the outside. And it sometimes can be hard to dig into that.
It's funny that you say that because if I think about doing that myself, the physical things I think would be the hardest for me because
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of self-esteem in my physical body. And so I think for me, if I were to do this, I think that would be harder than
Mm-hmm.
I'm nice to people or I
Right.
take
Right.
care of my family. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's so different from each person. And that's where if you look back and you see growth, maybe you feel like you're beautiful and all, but you have a hard time saying I'm giving and I'm loving. And
Right.
each person could be completely different.
I'm deserving.
Hmm.
It's definitely a lot. Um,
Yeah.
to it's a great way to grow your self-esteem and your self-love of doing that. Maybe we need to do a little self-love journal challenge.
Yeah, that would be great. Hey, Spoonful of Strength listeners. I know we've talked about nutrition on the podcast. Well, we can't forget about our furry friends.
That's right, Rachel. Our pets deserve the same love and care when it comes to what they eat. That's why we're excited to tell you about Space Dog treats sold by my business, Magical Mutts Creations.
These treats are made with all natural ingredients crafted right here in the USA and free from unnecessary additives. My dogs love the Salmon Galaxy Bites. They do a happy dance every time they hear the bag crinkle.
Supporting Magical Mutts means supporting a chronic illness-owned business that truly cares. Treat your pup to healthy, nutritious snacks they'll love.
Visit magicalmuttscreations.com today and discover the magic.
Because our furry friends also deserve healthy treats.
Well, let me ask you this. A lot of people who have not done journaling before have maybe a hard time like getting started. Are there certain journaling prompts that you can recommend or that you've used before? Something that you can, pick a prompt every day and then just write about it.
Prompts are great, and it is helpful for people. There's no right or wrong way to journal. Just pick up a pen and a notebook. Find what feels right for you. And it could be every
Hmm.
day is a different one. So if you're trying to process your emotions and self-reflection, some of the prompts could be, what emotions am I feeling today? And what might be triggering, similar to what I had mentioned earlier, as far as if your mood is affected by journaling, you might be able to see
Hmm.
what that might be.
Yeah, I think if you're wanting to find gratitude, as we've talked about, you could use a prompt such as, what's something that brought me joy recently, even if it's, something small, or how did I show kindness to myself today? That's a really good one that makes you more aware of treating yourself with kindness and the self-love that you had talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's easy as well when you're struggling with an illness that affects your physical body overall, like your MS, like my back issues that I've been, the chronic back issues and things. So another great prompt is, okay, it's easy to think about how your body is not supporting you, but how about reframe that and say, what's something that my body can do that I appreciate?
Hmm. Right,
You know,
right. And I love this when I found it, and I actually really want to do this. Write a letter to your illness. What would you say to it? Separate yourself from the symptoms and what your body is doing, and actually write a letter and express your anger and your frustration and your sadness. I think I mean, to me, that's so interesting that I think that would prompt me to do that.
yeah, I think that's a good one. The one thing that not many people do, but when I was going through my cancer journey, especially very early on, I got to the point where I stopped saying that I'm fighting cancer. I just said that I'm a cancer warrior because I didn't want to be in a fight with something inside my body. And so instead, I shifted my mindset of saying, I appreciate you for coming into my life. What is the lesson I'm supposed to be learning out of from this? And you can go now. um,
I
you
love
can go
that.
now. I'm listening and you can go. I don't want you to
Yeah.
stay, but actually, I guess I never liked the word fighting. I'm fighting for my life.
Yeah.
Fighting cancer. I'm fighting this. I'm battling this. That to me puts you in an immediate fight or flight mindset of
Hmm.
um of it. And then that adds even more stress.
Hmm.
Um
Yeah.
versus saying, okay, this is coming about. I don't understand the reason why it's in my life now. However,
Hmm.
there's a lesson there. There's something I should be doing. And so sometimes, especially in those initial diagnoses where journaling can really help because if you continue to do it on a regular basis, you'll be able to see a shift
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
that initial, oh my God, I am so fearful, I'm scared, I'm terrified, which is normal, which is a perfectly normal reaction to into where it's like, okay, I'm now in that acceptance mode of saying, okay, now I've accepted what I'm dealing with. How do I move forward with that? And sometimes when you reach a point where you're kind of feeling stuck maybe within your illness or you feel like it's just you're frustrated, um
Hmm.
it's important to also go back and read those journals and realize how much over time you have been able to shift.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think one last one, and I actually did this, and it was very, I don't even know what to say, if it was therapeutic or if it was, but it was very interesting. There's something going around Instagram where people will post, I met my younger self for coffee today. And a good prompt is, what would you tell your old self? And so I jumped on the train and I did this. But the idea is that you meet your younger self for coffee, what would you say? And so
Mhm.
this is mine. So it says, I met my younger self for coffee today. She sat across from me, eyes full of dreams, unaware of the road ahead. Why do you look so tired? She asked, sipping her drink. Because I've been fighting battles you don't even know about yet. She frowned. Battles? Yes, the exhaustion that feels endless. The moments when my body refuses to cooperate, no matter how much it needs to. Some relationships will fade because they won't understand, and that will be hurtful. But I smiled. I'll also find unwavering support in places I never expected. I'll learn that strength isn't just pushing through, but knowing when to rest. I'll discover joy in the quiet moments, in the victories that once seemed impossible. And I'll redefine success, not by how much I accomplish, but by how well I honor what my body needs. She stared at me, processing it all. So, does it get better? I took a deep breath. It gets different. Some days will be harder than you ever imagined, but you'll learn to rest without guilt, to advocate for yourself without fear, and to find beauty in the hardest moments. She tilted her head, thinking, will I be okay? I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You'll be more than okay. You'll be strong, even on the days you don't feel it. She smiled, and for the first time, I think she believed me. And that was something I put together um, a week or so ago.
That's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. What a great way to wrap this
Yeah.
section up. Should we put forth a challenge?
Yeah, let's do it. What I think we should do is I think that the week that this airs, you and I should do like a journal entry, whether it may be a prompt. Maybe we use
Hmm.
one of the prompts that we've got and we each write
Yep.
something and then share it.
Yeah.
And then what sort of challenge are you thinking?
I was thinking the self-love journal, 3 things that you love about yourself for 3 days over the next week.
I will put up an Instagram prompt on stories that if you all would like to share 3 things that you love about yourself, then at the end of the week, we will share those and we will be able to put together a post that shows the things that you love about yourself and be able to share that with our community. So be on the lookout for that. And we'd love to know the things that you love about yourself and give some self love this week.
So that is the end of our portion of this episode. And now let's welcome in Rebecca, all the way from the land down under. And she is joining us to talk about her hypermobile spectrum and POTS. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rebecca, from the way down under. How are you this morning? Well, for you this morning, it's evening our time.
It is, yes. And I'm recovering from COVID, so a little bit less than perfect. But actually, it's interesting that I'm actually feeling better in some ways because I've allowed myself to rest
Oh, good for
without
you.
guilt. So it's a little bit of a benefit that you can just rest freely
Yeah.
Mhm.
when you've got a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? Obviously I just said you're from Australia, so just tell us a little bit about who is Rebecca?
Mhm.
Well, yeah, and that's because I'm coming at you as Rebecca, but also as AK Huntington, which is what I'm putting out there as my pen name for my attempts at breaking into the publishing world. And that was part of a perfect storm, I suppose, that was not really an ideal storm, but one that happened, and it has some outcomes that are silver linings from it, like talking to you right now has come from that. But I actually was a registered nurse, and then I was mum, and I had my toddler, and then I was pregnant with my second pregnancy, and everything went downhill. I had a lot of symptoms that were very debilitating, but I'm not sure for those who have already had pregnancies. I felt with the first pregnancy, everything that I said was dismissed as, oh, you're a first-time mum. And so I was so excited to actually hear with credibility whenever I said something like, no, this is my second time round now. But when I said, I don't think you're hearing me on the extent of my symptoms, I'm debilitated by them, and really used my own nursing advocacy skills to speak up, I was still dismissed as, oh, second pregnancies are harder because everything's looser. So the dismissal just kind of came from there and kept coming. Everything that was a problem for me was put into breastfeeding or parenting and normal mothering, and just this expectation that mums are meant to struggle, I felt was put at me, and also my own, I suppose, internal ableism and things that are just inbuilt in me that through culture and whatever else that had me not feeling like I could say I'm struggling or I need help or this is this extent. It's like it was too hard to say this is really bad or this is I am really struggling. And because that would be horrible if I said that and there wasn't really a good reason. Like there had to be a good reason for you to say that. And so I suppose I could go into that for hours, but no, we don't have that long, just that one bit. But in as a trying to get a very long story a little bit more succinct, which is hard for me. I like to go on tangents, but I it was my son turns 8 this year, and I am only just this year starting to feel like I can walk without struggling and have my symptoms managed and treated. And it took me many years before I got to a diagnosis that ended up being hypermobile spectrum disorder, with a lot of the co-travelers of that, of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome or POTS, and others like reactive hypoglycemia and instability, cervical instability and pelvic instability. So there was a lot of reason for me to be struggling, but I never got any support for that. I never had any way of saying this is why, and so this is what I need. And it really highlighted for me the extent of female bias. And so now that I am doing better, I want to make sure that others out there are aware of something that with awareness can have a completely different trajectory to what I had, less debilitation and less disability. And the average is somewhere between 10 to 15 years of diagnosis. And I know that's quite common with a lot of chronic illnesses that you guys present on your podcast, but it is something that I'm now wanting to use what energy I do have, and the way that I've gotten to this space where I do feel like I have capacity, but not quite enough capacity to say go back to nursing or anything else, to actually just use my voice for those who are still too much in a struggling space to do that for themselves.
What were those initial symptoms that that you had for so many years? Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Absolutely. For me, it started with pain in my pelvis and my back, and my legs just feeling like I was walking through, like the air turned to concrete, the air turned to Play-Doh was how I kind of thought of it. Like it was just so hard to actually move through that. Even from something like just pulling into a cafe at the park right outside of the cafe, getting into the cafe was horrible and really difficult. And I'd have to stop so many times every couple of steps. And the difficulty with that, and shortness of breath was another. And it does become difficult for doctors because, of course, there's laxicity in pregnancy and there's normal. There's always normal levels of everything that kind of comes along with this. Like all of the things that easily put into that's normal baskets, or that's anxiety, or that's you overreacting. And what was really challenging about it, though, is that I kind of knew, like I did say, no, I don't think you're hearing me. And I really have gotten to the stage of, I feel like we need to acknowledge that females tend to not step up and not want to say it if it's not real or it's not really debilitating. So by the time I've gotten to the stage of saying I need to speak up about this and I'm asking for your help with this, it's really beyond that. Like
Right.
it really was next
Yeah.
level. But the obstetrician said, it's likely we can't, there's laxicity and stuff, so it all seemed normal to him. But when I kind of pushed even further, I think just to kind of subdue me, he said, well, go to the GP and get them to check it out, which they just listened to my lungs, which of course were clear because HSD is a connective tissue issue and you can't hear connective tissue through a stethoscope.
Right.
And my limb strength and everything was normal, which it will be at different times if I'm just sitting there. But is it normal as I try to be upright? And is it normal when the POTS kicks in and the dysautonomia kicks in that actually makes my heart race and everything else? So it was really convoluted with how things interplayed with the normal pregnancy things. And so I really feel like it being something that does afterwards, I've learned that there is a common thread of people getting the tipping point. Like there's signs throughout my childhood that I did have this, but there was a tipping point with my pregnancy. And that can be quite common. Hormones, puberty, even viruses, different things will tip it into something that then becomes debilitating. And being that it's a majority of POTS patients, at least 90% are female at childbearing age. So it is something that I think that group of obstetricians and GPs of first contact really kind of need to have more of awareness of. And also if we get more ways of testing for it, so they can say, look, this could be this, or it could be pregnancy. This is how we'll check. There isn't really a pathway for them to follow. So there's a long way for us to go with that. But it's also not rare. It's just rarely diagnosed. So definitely something that with long COVID coming in and POTS from that is starting to become a bit more aware. So I'm hopeful that we'll start to get some pathways and ways forward for these health professionals that do want to help, but they just didn't have any answers for me, and they continued to not have any answers for so long, years upon years upon years.
Are there actual definitive tests they can do to test for that, or is it more of like, I know like for many it's the elimination of other things, and then they're like, well, it's not A, B, and C, so it's likely this.
Yeah, there isn't really a definitive test unless you've got the genetic type that you can go and get the genetic testing for, which there are, I think that it keeps changing, 13 or 14. I think I heard one stage it's gone up to 14 different subtypes of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And the type that I've been given is hypermobile spectrum disorder. It doesn't fit into their criteria that they have for that diagnosis. So even though I do tick all those boxes, so I'm not really sure why they didn't, but there's really strict criteria that they need to follow before you can even get the genetic testing. And so you kind of end up, unless you've got enough of a problem, you don't get the genetic testing. But I feel like there is a lot that can be done in the screening aspect of it, like maybe not diagnosing, but it's actually super simple to check for signs of hypermobility. Like I know you don't have the video, but I can just do it by asking somebody to bend over and can they touch the floor? A couple of quick questions to see if there's some extra mobility within their joints. It's called the Beighton score, that indicates that there is a level of hypermobility. And then that person can kind of go, well, does this fit? How much of, if I look into this hypermobility stuff, how much of this fits for me? And maybe I can just put some of those things into my management, because there's a lot of conservative management that once you know what you're looking for, it's actually the opposite of what the normal healthy things are. So most people would be told to, with the POTS aspect that goes hand in hand with the hypermobility spectrum disorder for me, we do need to increase our amount of salt to increase the blood flow up to our brains. So if you're trying to be healthy and you're trying to do all you can to get better because you're suffering, you can be doing really the opposite for yourself by doing the normal healthy things. Whereas if you learn about hypermobility by somebody saying, look, I've screened and you've got a bit of extra flexibility, just maybe keep your eye, go to the Ellis Dental Society webpage, see what you find there. You can give people so much power of their own to start to help themselves conservatively while you're on that diagnosis journey and trying to figure it out. Because yes, it is a process of elimination, having to rule out MS, which again, still is a bit tricky. I'm still in the process, even though I did have it ruled out. I've now had another MRI, and that did show that it couldn't rule out demyelinating lesions, but then the neurologist thought, no, doesn't look MSy, but that neurologist was quite dismissive right from the start, didn't want me to have the MRI. So I'm kind of forever stuck in this. I'm pretty sure it's the EDS basket, but I still need to rule out something that can be treated. And we end up being under so many specialists. You name a specialist and we're under it. And it also has to be the specialist because it's just not in the pathways yet for anybody else. And so it's a lot. It's a big process to go through. Even if you were to be recognized straight away, it would still be a long process to rule out everything else. But I just feel like there is so much that can be done in between time. And for the POTS aspect, and the POTS was the brain fog and not being able to feel like I could cognitively figure things out. That was actually my most debilitating. I remember going to the doctor and saying, look, the pelvis, the pain, the mobility, it's all huge. But actually, if I could only take away one thing, it would be my brain function, if I could fix that, because that's the most limiting to everything that I do in my life. And that's as simple as a Nasaline test that I could do in this bedroom with nothing more than a blood pressure monitor and knowledge and 10 minutes. And you could check it in any GP office. Anybody who had the knowledge would be able to do that test to determine if your heart rate does go up 30 beats per minute without the blood pressure dropping. It's a pretty straightforward thing, actually. So that one is just an awareness thing to get you on that pathway for that. But it's more that we need more access to more knowledgeable people to make that diagnosis less lengthy.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Rachel from Spoonful of Strength. My Etsy shop is a chronic illness-owned business where I design t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, magnets, and more, all with a focus on chronic illness empowerment. Whether you're looking for something cozy, funny, or inspiring, I've got you covered. I also take custom orders because your story deserves to shine. Visit spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. That's spoonful with 2 L's. And enjoy 25% off your order with the code podcast at checkout. Let's wear our strength with pride, one design at a time.
And for those that aren't aware of the hypermobile spectrum disorder and POTS, can you give us a brief explanation of what exactly those disorders are?
Yes, brief I can try, but it is very, very tricky because for POTS can happen from different things, but like I said, mine comes from the hypermobile aspect, and that's because the hypermobility spectrum disorder or the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, whatever we want to basket we want to put it into, it means that the collagen throughout my body or the building blocks of my connective tissue is not as structurally sound as it needed to be. It's not built right. And connective tissue is through literally everything in your body, from head to toe, every organ system. And so it impacts on everything: vision, hearing, skin, healing, mobility, because it's what makes your joints stay together. And there's so many ways that the body works. It's actually super fascinating. I love learning all about it. If it wasn't so debilitating and scary and horrible, I'd kind of be really fascinated by it all, which I still am. Like learning even the way that the pressure on your foot gives feedback through your ligaments and through your connective tissues, so you know where you are in space so that you can move. And then the way that that makes your eyes not wobble like a camera that doesn't have the video stability as you're walking. Like, we don't all feel sick from that because it gives feedback that tells you there's so many ways that everything works in a really specific way from all of those autonomic things that you don't have any control over. They're just happening. Like your digestion, it just happens. You look out in brighter lights, your pupils dilate, things just happen automatically. And that's what POTS is, an umbrella of dysautonomia, the umbrella is dysautonomia, which means that the autonomic functions of the nervous system are not working properly. And for me with the HSD, you can see how that could happen when things are shifting in my body in ways that they shouldn't. So maybe it's coming from my neck. I've got the cervical instability, and everything that comes out of your brain down to your neck is really important. And I've got vertebrae that move around too much there, so they can easily be part of the problem, putting some pressure on nerves, stopping the brainstem from working properly. Or maybe it's just that my vessels in my legs are too stretchy, and so they don't bring back up the blood when I stand up sufficiently to my heart. So then my heart has to dump in adrenaline to push up my heart rate to get blood up to my brain. So my literal survival just from standing up or sitting up or getting out of bed. And that then has another onslaught of repercussions that come into, sleep and the adrenaline dumping at night. And it just keeps this spiral going of ongoing issues that keep coming from each of those things. So as much as there's so many ways that it can go wrong and so many different ways that it can be impacted, I think that also means that there's so many ways that we can make changes and so many ways that we can have improvement. But at the moment, what we kind of get told is, well, we can't do anything about it, so there's no cure. So they don't really tend to want to give you anywhere to go with it. But there is so much you can do because there are so many things, and knowledge is hugely powerful in this condition. It is huge. And then also getting the treatments, like having prolotherapy. I had prolotherapy to my pelvis because that was one of my problems that kept me from not being able to walk. And then the pain and everything would then keep me up at night. And then my dysautonomia would be worse the next day because I'd been up with pain. And so everything just kept spiraling in on itself. But once we can get some of those bigger guns, those bigger influences dealt with, then those things that I'm doing have better impact. So I could be doing all the right things and just kind of keeping myself a little bit better, but not really actually getting anywhere. So then when we had the prolotherapy to fix my pelvis up with makes it a bit stronger in the ligaments. And then I had the same in my neck. So had my own blood injected with, that one was PRP, which is plasma-rich protein injections into my ligaments in my neck. So they then kind of get stronger to do their job better. So before that, any of the exercises I was doing were just kind of breaking me and making me worse because I could never do them without then causing further harm to myself. Whereas once they got stable and we really dropped everything right back down to the simplest of things to start again, and I mean just squeezing one butt cheek and then the other, that was my exercise for like a couple of weeks. And then once that was there, then we retrained my body how to undo all of the ways that it had created to cope and keep upright to get to kids who just, I don't know how, but I think that my maternal instincts somehow were stronger than the pull of gravity that kept me actually being able to get out of bed to go to them. And maybe that was something that helped because it meant that I did have to. And so I did keep movement happening, but also it was very debilitating to do that.
So you mentioned early on when you first hopped on that you were recovering from COVID. So those illnesses, does that impact your normal symptoms?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So what would be, say, a normal 3-day process becomes months. And again, it's one of those things that I'm finding a lot better with the more that I've had done and the more of those different aspects that I've had figured out and treated. This round was a very different situation for me. And I've learnt to, yes, the viruses are definitely a trigger. Viruses are a trigger for flares. Weather is a trigger for flares. So many things are a trigger for flares. There's the mast cell activation syndrome. I think we're going to find a lot of answers within that, meaning that just things that we shouldn't be allergic to, or an environment our body overreacts to. And then that histamine onslaught in our body causes a whole nother level of issues in there. And then I've also discovered I've got reactive hypoglycemia, which I just discovered by chance. And that has really helped take away some of the brain fog. So I put on a device to watch my sugars so that I could try to keep them down, because inflammation is a big part of it all, and sugar drives inflammation. So the idea was that I'd actually learn what sugars were driving my sugars up, what food was driving my sugars up, and keep them lower. But actually what I realized was that I was dangerously down low in 3 points. You guys have different, we've got millimoles a liter of blood sugar levels, but it was hypoglycemia was happening through the night and after eating. So it actually does the opposite. When I eat, my sugars go down. And so that was probably a big part of my brain fog. And I feel a lot safer having that treated. There's an aspect of that has lessened. So things become more manageable with more diagnoses I get and the more treatment I get. And then also I know how to now accept when I have a virus, that I have to kind of make sure that I'm not staying in bed too long and letting the virus needs management take over from my daily management. I've got to make sure I'm still not losing my conditioning. I'm still kind of continuing. It's a balance. It's always a pacing and balancing act of how much do you let this one take over, and how much do we see to the needs of this part of my body that needs, my pelvis needs me to rest, but my POTS needs me to walk and get good strength in my muscles. But so what's good for one aspect isn't good for the other. So it's always a bit of a balancing act. And I think that's just a learning and trial and error, and starting to trust my body and kind of say, what do you need? What is it that is going to serve me right now? Do I need some movement? Do I need more rest? And is it true rest instead of just actually pretending to rest, but just feeling guilty and not actually making it a useful rest. And yeah, it's a long pathway to learn that, but that's, I suppose, why I'm putting this stuff out here, so that people have a smaller pathway to learning that. If I can give them my tricks and tips of what has worked for me, and maybe it does or doesn't work for them, because it is very individualized. But if it just makes it a bit easier for them to go, I'll try that, or that's something I hadn't thought of, then maybe that can make a big difference. Because for me, I feel like it's actually just those little changes, but millions of them. I remember writing a list for one of the first specialists I went to I thought I knew that they were going to ask, what have you been doing to try to make it better? And what changes have you made? And what makes it better? What makes it worse? And so I started writing a list, and I did it like a split seam. And I had each little sewing thread that had been using it, and it was in an A4 piece of paper, and it had all the lines on it, and I had things on every side of that line going down, and I never even came to the number of things that I do each day. And it's those little things that make a difference, because they're accessible and they're something that I can do. Like, a little less heat in the shower, and a little less time in the shower, and resting after a shower. And that all comes from knowledge. And I couldn't be there if nobody pointed out to me that this is what it was. If everybody was still telling me it's anxiety, or everybody was still telling me it's all in my head, and I didn't get to the diagnosis stage, basically from people online sharing, which is how I got there. And so that's why I really want to give back as well, because they saved me with their sharing. And so I want to do that for others too.
I really like the phrase that you used of, I don't think you're hearing me, because a lot of us go through that frustration of, you're not hearing what I'm trying, or you're not hearing how much this has impacted my life. And so I love that you're really pushing the advocacy and finding those little tips and wanting to share those with others. So tell us a little bit about this book that you wrote.
The book came, and I love that I'm talking to you today with COVID, because it all actually started with COVID New Year's Eve a year ago in 2024, when I woke up with COVID and knew I had to have a bit of a day in bed, and just was doing the scrolling of all the New Year's resolutions. And one of them spoke about conscious dumping, and it said that you just put all of your thoughts straight onto the journal without changing it, just go straight there. And I'd just woken up from my dream, and I'd been watching all these series of things of binging, and so it was obviously from the TV shows I'd been watching that night. The characters were in my head, and I'd happened, like the perfect storm, I said, I'd happened to be shadowing my daughter with a creative writing course. And so I had some ideas of from that Australian Writing Centre on how to put down character development. And so I just started doing that. And then I just didn't stop. And then I had a 110,000 word manuscript of a fiction manuscript that has a lot of heart of my condition and representation in that, kind of like a if nothing else comes to you but this book, you'll have strategies and you'll have diagnosis, things to check out with people, words and directions to follow and Google, and find your own help, or even learn to just squeeze your butt cheeks to get some blood flow if you feel dizzy. Just some little tips in there as kind of a morph between a self-help book and and a completely fiction entertaining read. So it's not so much anymore about that book. It is, I want to get that book out there. I want to do everything I can with that. But it's actually for me more about these moments with you and starting conversations and just highlighting and awareness raising.
Has that been released yet, or is that where's the status of that?
No, if anybody knows publishers and agents or people who can help me with that, bring them my way, because that's a whole new learning curve to find out and how to get into and crack the publishing industry. I'm having fun with that though. I'm enjoying doing pitches to publishers and things, and it's all a great experience that I'm just trying to not put pressure on myself for any outcomes. It's about these moments of the advocacy is still getting out there. The awareness is still getting out there. Whether the book does or not would be great if at some stage I got an income, having not had an income for the past 8 years or whatever it has been. It would be nice if something came through in that way. But yeah, and I do want to. I really feel that it's a career path and something that I'd really like to get into. It's like I found this unicorn of something that is both cathartic for me, that I'm basically journaling. I'm basically downloading these thoughts that are just always swirling that I feel like needs to get out there for somebody. But I've got a way of putting it into something, and it feels like meditation. Like, I'm terrible at meditation. I know how important it is for the nervous system, and nervous system is everything with this condition. And so I want to do meditation, but my brain can't link to it. But if I just pop my fingers onto the laptop and just let it just flow in my writing, then that's meditation. It just gives myself a break, and that's my form of meditation. So yeah, I do definitely want to get out there. I kind of thought of everybody who there's a big aspect of this that becomes an extra level of difficulty, of trauma, of there's enough that's difficult to navigate with the condition and the symptoms itself, but there's a whole nother layer that comes from misunderstanding and lack of awareness, especially in family members who there's a lot of internal ableism and things that really impact on their ability to actually accept what is going on when they can't see it and they can't understand it. And there's years of doctors saying, well, that test came back negative. You start to get this picture built up of you that you're a hypochondriac, or that you're just trying to get attention, and then that becomes damaging in itself. And then there's a whole nother layer to have to work through. So I might not be able to do anything about the symptoms and the condition itself, but I don't see why we still need to be having the extra of all of that unnecessary harm that comes from lack of awareness. And so when I was writing it, I was really trying to kind of think of, what would my husband, how would I get this across to him? Because he's not going to read a book. So I kind of made it quite, he hasn't read a book in 20 years, and he's not going to. So unless this gets made into a movie, it's not getting into his brain. So I kind of made it, a little bit of Fast and Furious meets Taken, kind of, so it can become a motion picture hit that he eventually watches, or just more a bit commercial, so that it can be put into the hands of family and friends without it being like even just talking to you guys, it's so hard to be succinct and actually give somebody something that says this is what's going on in a way that they understand, get the gravity of, and it's not 5 hours because there is so many levels to it. And so nobody's going to watch that because 10 minutes isn't enough and they're not going to watch anything more than 10 minutes, but they might read a book and they might watch a movie. And so I feel like that's a way for us to get it beyond. At the moment, I feel like it's just the people who are personally impacted. Maybe they're carers, if they're good enough carers to look into it, and doctors who have seen the problem and keep getting that cohort of people or have personal experience with it themselves. So it's only the people who are already aware who keep getting more knowledge, and the people outside of that just are still in the dark about it. So I'm really trying to access and get into some people who wouldn't normally. I'd love for it to be as aware, like you say, MS, and people understand. Of course, they don't know the full impact. There's never going to be that they really understand exactly what you're going through, but there's at least a level of, oh, okay, I get that there's something going on there. They've got something that they can attach that word to and have a little level of understanding without so much effort from the individual. But at the moment, it's a really big extra drain to have family and friends and the general public and even health professionals not understand the situation. So my goal with the book, I suppose, is to get more awareness across into the general public.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. I am, we'll definitely be keeping an eye out for when that's published so that we can get it downloaded and check it out.
Yes, when, Tina?
Yeah, when it's published. Well, you know what? We have an amazing following, and you never know who may be reaching out and say, hey, you know what?
Absolutely.
Check out this way to publish your book. Tell our listeners how we can follow you.
I do have a little baby website that I've been trying to do through my brain fog. It's akhuntington.com, and through there you can go to my Instagram, which you see, I don't even really know what my handle is. I think it's aka.invis_able. So working on the invisible aspect of this condition. It is a dynamic and invisible. I like to call it, I like the wording of non-apparent disability, but it's just not so vitally. So invisible is what I'll stick with. And yeah, so you can find me on Instagram as AK Huntington or AKA Invisible, or on just Google AK Huntington, and hopefully my website will pop up. And yeah, I'll try to start on I'm also doing a podcast. If I can figure out all these bits and pieces. I'm currently today, before joining you, I was trying to get the next episode on there. So hopefully that will be out very soon. And that's called Get Living Wrong with Me. Working off the whole aspect that, I'm not going to even get the podcast right. It's taken me too long to get that next episode out, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it in my own time, in my own way. And it might be wrong that I put so much salt on my food to you, but that's my way because I know what's going on in my system. And so, yeah, just embracing the things that are not going to be perfect, but I'm going to keep stepping forward. And just another way for me to put things out there, and I'll see how that one goes.
Good. Yeah, I was checking out your website, and I love it's got some blog posts, and it had the first episode of your podcast. So we'll definitely tag all of that in our description so that our listeners can find you and follow you and get to know you a little bit more. Gosh, thank you so much for coming today. This has been great. I really love how good of an advocate you are, and you've got a lot of knowledge. I'm sure that comes from being a nurse, but it's just interesting, and we hope that you're able to get the treatments and everything and getting over COVID, and we hope that you are feeling better soon. And we just appreciate you taking time out to come and visit with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Tina mentioned before about the audience that you have, and that has been one of the biggest blessings to just actually, it is the chronic illness community is the most uplifting, supportive. It is never about, I want to get my way to the top. It's always about lifting everybody else. And it's so beautiful, like yourselves and what you're doing. It's all about community. And that has been the biggest positive to come out of this journey and this pathway that I've ended up on. And so thank you to people like yourselves who do that, and all that wonderful community of people out there who share and give back.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's so nice.
She was such a lovely I could have chatted with her
Yeah.
for a good another hour at least. Like,
Oh, there, I know. I
definitely
had
one
so
that I
many.
could have just kicked, no more questions and
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. She, I could tell that being a nurse, that she had a lot of background information, and I love that she educates herself about all of these illnesses, and trying to find ways to help the symptoms, even if she's not getting a lot of help, getting to the diagnosis. And she just seemed like just a wealth of knowledge, and I love the ideas that she kind of talked about, and I love that she's very good at advocating. I said it when we were talking to her, but I love just saying, I don't think you're understanding how much this is impacting my life. And having the courage to say that to a doctor, I think is just wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of Spoonful of Strength. And tune in next Tuesday. Rachel and I will be talking all about romance. A G-rated one, right? Though.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. Yeah. The impacts that living with a chronic illness has on your romantic relationships, because it obviously is, it's tough. It can be a hard thing to maneuver through. And then our Spoonie for next week is Stephanie, and she'll be joining us talking about living with granulomatosis with polyangiitis and psoriatic arthritis. So have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you all next Tuesday.
Take care. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Spoonful of Strength. We hope that you found a little inspiration and maybe even a new perspective to carry with you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit that like button, follow us for more, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And if you're feeling generous, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your support helps us reach more Spoonies just like you.
Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and keep finding strength in your story. Bye for now.
And see you next time on Spoonful of Strength.